Welcome, everyone. I'd like to introduce Kert Browne, one of the core developers of BigBlueButton. Kert has been working on the project for over 6 years now, probably closer to 7. And Kert actually did a lot of work in the Flash client years ago and was instrumental in moving us to HTML5, and now has actually been taking the lead on the whiteboard, which he's going to share some of the work that he's been doing to build upon it. Kert, the floor is yours.
All right, well, thank you very much. So as Fred mentioned, my name is Kert Browne, and I've been working with Blindside for quite a while now. Um, Mainly, I originally started just working on the accessibility of the clients and making sure that they're basically working with all the screen readers and assistive technologies, mainly JAWS and NVDA, TalkBack, and a few of the other ones on mobile. And then, as Fred mentioned, I've basically moved on now to doing some work for the whiteboard, originally moving the old whiteboard and replacing it with TLDraw, which happens to be quite an improvement on what we had before. So today, just to give you a sort of overview of what I'm going to be going over, Whiteboard Vision, which is essentially a new feature to the whiteboard. But before I get into that, I just want to go over some of the problems and issues that we had as to why this feature might be useful, or the need for it came up, basically. And it's mainly to do with the problem of the way our current whiteboard works. There's essentially only two modes. There's the sort of one-to-many interaction, which is what you're seeing now. So as the presenter, I can draw annotations on the whiteboard, move my cursor around, and as viewers, everybody should be seeing what I'm transmitting. And this is fine for instructors teaching a class. But for interactions, we don't have too many options for the whiteboard. As of right now, we just have a sort of multi-user whiteboard option, or mode rather, which is essentially a many-to-many type of interaction, where once enabled, anybody that has access to the whiteboard can interact with it, draw shapes, move their cursors around, and anybody else in the meeting, regardless of whether or not you have access to interact with the whiteboard, you still will see what everybody else is doing. And this can become a little problematic. There were a few instances in the keynote opening speech by Fred where he had essentially asked the people in the meeting to move their cursors over a location on a map to where you were located. And in multi-user whiteboard, that's great, cool feature. But when there's a lot of cursors in the meeting, it can cause some accessibility issues where you can't necessarily see what's hidden underneath the cursor labels. So this was one of the reasons for wanting a more tailored experience to the whiteboard, which represents sort of many-to-one type of interaction, where all the users who have access to the whiteboard can basically be interacting and doing what they need to be doing without any interactions or distractions from other users using the whiteboard at the same time. Now, currently in BigBlueButton, we do have access to breakout rooms, which can simulate this sort of setup, because essentially you would just create your breakout rooms and assign them to students. But this is not ideal. It does cause you to open up new tabs. And because of that, it's not as easy to sort of monitor and give real-time feedback as to what's going on. Because if you happen to jump into one room, you may not be able to see what's going on with another, or have access to students that may need help. So it's essentially a way of sort of getting around these issues, is why we've sort of introduced this new whiteboard mode. Just to go on a little further about the breakout rooms, they do have a limitation when trying to set up this kind of interaction where you want a lot of people basically doing an assignment or a work on a slide for whatever reason. In breakout rooms, say for instance, we had a classroom with 25 people or more. You would essentially have to create a new room for each user, and then assign those users to their own individual room. For group interactions, this is perfectly fine, because in that situation, you would want the group to have a sort of a huddle situation where they physically move to another room. But for just real-time interactions where you want to see what users are doing and provide feedback to them while they're working on the whiteboard, specifically for individuals and large classes, this is not ideal. There are times where people can get lost in between the tabs, or you'd have to wait for the users that you assign to a room to actually join the room first. And there's just a few steps that has to happen for it to run smoothly. There was the introduction of a Whiteboard Vision to sort of provide more insight and be able to see what's going on in the breakout rooms, but it's not ideal for individual correction and feedback and interactions. So the solution to this was the Whiteboard Vision. Now the Whiteboard Vision essentially tries to provide a single whiteboard for each user in one session. So if there's 25 users in a meeting and you give them access to Whiteboard Vision, basically they should only see their annotations and what they're doing while interacting with the whiteboard. They also do have the option to see the instructor's annotations and the instructor's cursors. And this is just for feedback so that the presenter or instructor can basically jump between whiteboards and help whatever student needs help with whatever the problem is. And the whole goal of this is essentially just to streamline sort of the session management and efficiency while giving feedback to the students. So just two quick use cases. One primary use case that can be used is for math classes. So if you have a bunch of slides, each with math problems, so long division, any kind of problem where you need to be showing working, you can have that up on the slide, and this teacher will get a view of all of the students' work as it's going on and be able to provide feedback to any student that needs assistance or just to give corrections or anything, just provide feedback basically and be able to interact with each student individually. Another example is for science classes. So using the whiteboard for each student to draw diagrams in hopes of explaining any kind of complex concepts. The instructor can then use the Whiteboard Vision to provide any kind of clarification or corrections to the students while they're in the process of working through the problems. And this provides lots of benefits like understanding because of the complex topics being explained through visualization. So if I just share my screen here, I can show you an example of what this would look like. Okay. And if you can see my shared screen here, I have three windows open. The instructor and two students. This is just showing how the Whiteboard Vision feature would basically be working. Currently, it's in a prototype version, so a lot of the sort of UI may change in the future and some of the interactions, but I'll talk about that a little bit after. So once you're in this sort of whiteboard state, this is the regular presenter does whatever they want, and the users basically see whatever the presenter does. Then you have the also known multi-user whiteboard, where once enabled, all users can see what anybody who has access to the whiteboard is doing, like I mentioned before. But where it gets interesting with the new feature is if, for instance, you have a slide with a bunch of questions, and this ends up being a sort of a work slide where you want your students to basically interact and do their work without anybody else seeing, you can basically enable multi-user whiteboard and then add the Whiteboard Vision. So that button that I clicked down at the bottom basically enables Whiteboard Vision. So you can see once it gets clicked, the presenter gets a collage of all of the users who currently have access to the whiteboard. And these are basically live updates for whatever the students are doing at the time. So you could have one student who's, I guess, doing a bunch of marks, and you can see up in the top that they get reflected basically when they're written. And then that goes for the other student as well. They only get to see their and nothing else. From this point, if the teacher sees that one of the students in the collage isn't basically getting along with the assignment or is having struggles, from this, there's a little button at the bottom to focus in on whose ever whiteboard you want to interact with. So the student's having some issues, so we can just zoom into their whiteboard. And now you can see that the student itself can see the instructor's cursors, and the instructor has the ability to basically interact with them specifically for whatever feedback they're trying to provide. And it gives you a little indication down at the bottom right now, basically where, whose whiteboard you're interacting with. And this can zoom out. At the moment, we haven't really decided how we're going to be displaying all of these, whether it just stays in a fully expanding window that'll end up giving you scroll bars, or whether we want to hide this behind a pagination, sort of like the cameras, and then have them order based on activity. But these sort of annotations also persist once you're out of the sort of vision mode, if it were. So we can basically go in between slides and then return to it and still see all of the user's annotations. So I'll be talking about the future plans for this because a lot of this still needs fleshed out designs for how we're going to surface some of this data. Like once we come out of the whiteboard, basically where we would put a collage of any slides that had Whiteboard Vision interactions, so that the instructor would know that, well, slide 2 actually did have some sort of work going on, and then being able to download and retrieve those later for the meeting. And then just as another example here, the word association, giving it to students. Students can either get them right or wrong, and then the instructor can go in and either incorrect or do whatever corrections they would want to for whatever student they require. And like I said before, those persist past the meeting. But that's essentially what the feature looks like now for the moment. So if I just stop sharing my screen here. So there are still a lot of work that needs to basically go in to get this sort of fleshed out and fully finished. There were talks about how we were going to surface a sort of signaling mechanism so that the students can signal to the teacher when they're either need assistance or they're completed the assignment. The raise hand does work currently, but just adding some UI tweaks to basically have that grid view also tell you what's going on with the students and whether they should be ordered by who's having trouble or anything like that. There's also work that needs to be going in to allow for the direct two-way communication between students whenever the Whiteboard Vision mode is on and you're focused on a student, if you want to just talk to them directly as opposed to private chats or something like that. And also a review mode. So currently there's no way to review the work that was done on the Whiteboard Vision slides without the students having access to change their work. So we want to have a sort of a read-only mode for Whiteboard Vision. So essentially the instructor can make their corrections or review any information while the students no longer have access to make any corrections or changes or updates. And also a sort of collage feature so that when I pointed before, if you go past a few slides and you forget what slide had some Whiteboard Vision work done, we basically just need a way to surface that information and make it visible to the instructor. So all in all, with the future plans, it's just a lot of sort of UI enhancements and tweaks to make switching between these modes a little easier than it is right now. Because currently, to enable the Whiteboard Vision, you have to enable multi-user whiteboard first, and then enable the Whiteboard Vision to get it to work. So ideally, we would just want to have one button to enable this feature, just like multi-user. You just click multi-user and it turns on. So just to summarize pretty much what I've gone over so far, the Whiteboard Vision is essentially a new feature or mode to the whiteboard, and it's basically to enhance the interactive learning experience. It's more personalized, so the whiteboards are individualized. Basically, each user has their own, so their feedback would be individualized based on what they do. And then with some upcoming features and functionality, UI tweaks, all of that still has to be smoothed out before we fully basically implement this feature. And overall, the sort of outcome for it all is just to have a more streamlined and engaging and more fruitful learning and teaching experience for the users and teachers that happen to use the whiteboard. But I believe that's pretty much it. Anybody has any questions or suggestions for how we can improve this?
Really good, Kurt. There's some discussion that's going on in the chat.
Oh yes, I haven't seen that. Will the teacher be able to annotate the board for everyone with this? Yes. So the teacher is able to annotate for everyone and push those annotations down so everyone can see. So if there's any updates to the slide that you want to add or comments so that everybody can see that, that is possible. With the current setup, you basically have to turn off the Whiteboard Vision and any slides or any annotations that you make while Whiteboard Vision is off will get propagated to all of the slides once Whiteboard Vision is turned on. That is also something that we'll be basically checking the designs to see if the UX can be improved for that. What was the other question? So the Whiteboard Vision only works per slide, so the student won't be able to sort of get ahead of you. That's it's going to be just restricted until the teacher decides to move forward. So once Whiteboard Vision is enabled, you can't actually switch the slides to move on until it's closed or turned off at this point. What was the other question? If the student's quicker, and the instructor works with the student needing assistance, is the interaction? So right now, there is no audio component. There were some designs for the audio button to allow that audio interaction, but currently it is not active. So they only get to see annotations and cursor movements from the instructor. But in the future, that's part of the roadmap. And the teacher present individual students' work with the whole class. So at the moment they can't, but that is partially the goal. Being able to just have a collage of all the work that's been done, and then being able to surface that information to the presenter or the users of the classroom. We haven't fully fleshed out how we're going to have that be done through the UI, but it's part of the plan. And yes, the whiteboards are saved. Currently, they're just saved as annotations. So whenever you load up your whiteboard, it'll just filter out the annotations related to your whiteboard. And is the participants' content? The participants' content is all stored on the server. All of the annotations get sent to akka, and then they're just filtered out on the client side based on which annotations you need. So when Whiteboard Vision is enabled, it filters out any annotation that wasn't created by you or created by the professor or instructor. And as far as how many whiteboards you can see at once, I've tested it so far on a larger screen, and it can basically support as many users are in the user list. It'll just give you a scrolling machine, and you'll just see an infinite list of a whiteboard for every user. And then you'll get their updates. They happen. I think that was all of the questions. Did I miss any? Give feedback. None of this information goes back to the learning dashboard yet, but that is a possibility. Any information that we do track from the Whiteboard Vision can be sent back to the learning dashboard. But currently, it does not. Okay.
Kurt, that was good. Right. That was really good. Who here would like to try out Whiteboard Vision as we go through the development of it? Because we would like to, we have many things we can do, but we want to do the things that have the most impact for teachers, instructors, professors. So I'm going to suggest, finding the best way to do this. Just click on my name and do a private chat, and just send me your email address in private chat. You do that right now. We'll put together a little mailing list and gather together some folks that as we do advance on the project, we will be able to pull you together as a group, do some presentations, get your feedback directly, and help us shape this. We're not going to steal any thunder from Steve tomorrow, but there's work underway for TLDraw 2.0. So Whiteboard Vision is this, I believe this is going to come after the 2.0 merge.
Yes. Because right now this is using the TLDraw 1.0, and it's quite a bit different in the way we'll have to set it up.
Yes. Another cool thing on Kurt's machine is TLDraw 2.0 development environment, which is always cool to see. You were getting 2.7 out, and then 2.8, if all goes well, you'll see TLDraw 2.0 on it. And it's just going to be better. And then this is the foundation on which we get to do really cool stuff like Whiteboard Vision, of which we have been thinking about for quite a while. And that was, TLDraw was a foundational piece towards that. All right, we're coming up to the end. Thank you, Kurt, for the presentation. That was awesome. We'll look forward to seeing more. Really good work.